You're watching Fugitive Red-Eye, and welcome to another Top 10 video. I've been wanting to do this one for a while, and I've teased it plenty of times before. But today we'll be talking about my top 10 video game bosses of all time. Now this list has actually changed since I originally conceived the video, because my number one spot has actually changed. So that'll be interesting to see. I held a poll on my channel as to whether or not this was the next video you wanted to see, and this was in the lead for the longest time. It's currently tied, but since it was in the lead for longer, I'm doing it now. The one rule that I've given myself is not to allow multiple bosses per franchise, and I will say I will be counting Deltarune and Undertale as one franchise. I think that makes sense. You could probably figure there was going to be a character from at least one of those games on this list with how much I've played them. So let's just, without further ado, jump right into it. So starting off the list at number 10, we have General Rom from Gears of War 1. General Rom is the big bad in Gears of War 1. He's a giant locust general that can control the Krill, which is really cool. The Krill are these weird little flying creatures that will kill you in the dark that can't handle being in the light. And they're like a level hazard on the level Nightfall. But General Rom somehow has the ability to control them. It's a really cool fight. You fight him on this big, like, ship train thing, and you have to get to a turret, but you have to get to it really quickly because, again, he'll send the Krill after you and he'll knock out the lights and stuff like that. It's a really cool fight. He's introduced really early on in the game, and he's built up throughout the entire game. And overall, I just think he was the most memorable of the Gears of War bosses. So I felt that he definitely deserved a spot on this list, so that's why I gave him number 10. Now we're moving on to number 9, which is Monster Ock from Spider-Man on PS1. Now, Monster Ock is a boss that you don't really fight, you kind of just run away from. But I remember as a kid, he was so cool, because Carnage gets killed and his symbiote spills down onto Dr. Octopus, turning him into a symbiote version of him, the Monster Ock. Monster Ock chases you throughout this big, long metal corridor while, like, constantly telling you to die in this really creepy, like, distorted voice. Very creepy level in the game, and it's a very interesting tonal shift. Very fun and very nostalgic. So I think just due to the sheer iconicness of how creepy this boss is, he deserved to be number 9. Alright, moving on to number 8, we have the Great Mighty Pooh from Conker's Bad Fur Day and Conker Live and Reloaded. The boss fight's essentially identical between the two. If I had to pick one, I would obviously pick the Bad Fur Day one. That's not the case with all of the bosses in Conker, but with the Great Mighty Pooh in Bad Fur Day, the language is uncensored, and the gameplay just actually works better there. If it was one of the shooter levels, then Live and Reloaded would be the superior choice. But for the most part, the Bad Fur Day version of the Great Mighty Pooh is the superior one. But it's one of the most iconic boss fights. It's from my favorite game of all time. He's fairly simple to defeat. You just throw toilet paper in his mouth with increasing in number each time, and then you flush him. Also leading up to that, you give him sweet corn, again also increasing in number each time. But he's easily the most iconic Conker boss, so of course he's going to be on this list. Alright, now we're on to number 7, the Icon of Sin, specifically from Doom Eternal. Doom Eternal is easily my favorite Doom game now, and the Icon of Sin is such a kick-ass boss fight. Everything about Doom Eternal is just a complete and total rush of testosterone, and this fight was no exception. He has this armor that you have to shoot off of him before you can actually damage him, and they give you power-ups constantly throughout the map. It's a really cool fight. It's an epic, like, final battle in a big city. And it's bringing back an iconic boss, the Icon of Sin, the final boss for Doom 2, only making it a full-bodied monster instead of a giant picture of a head on a wall. So overall, it's just a better version, because it's actually a demon rather than just a big square with a face on it. Overall, really cool fight. Doom Eternal's a great game. Alright, number 6, we have Gruntilda from Banjo-Kazooie. So I recently beat this one again on stream. Well, it was my first time beating it on stream, but my 4th time beating her overall, I think. Gruntilda, she's iconic. She's the boss in Banjo-Kazooie. She's the whole reason you play the game in the first place, because she kidnaps Banjo's sister. And the battle has very interesting phases. You start out where you just dodge her sweeping attacks where she swoops down at you, and then you peck her. Then, after you finish that, she begins throwing fireballs at you, at which point you have to shoot eggs at her and dodge the fireballs. And she takes to the air, and you have to fly and use the beak bomb, which is my least favorite phase in the fight. But then after that, you have to summon Jinjos to attack her while she's got a shield on. And then ultimately, once you've used all the Jinjos, you summon the Jinjo-nator, which is a gigantic Jinjo, to finish her off. The fight is both fun and frustrating, especially if you don't have the shield, which requires that you have all but 2 Jiggies in the game. And I did it without the shield this time because, again, I didn't want to have to go get all the Jiggies, all but 2. But yeah, great boss fight. It's my favorite Rareware fight. I think it's probably the most fun and iconic. I never did finish like Donkey Kong 64, so maybe that's more fun. I don't know. But Gruntilda I always felt was more fun. I specifically chose the Gruntilda fight from Banjo-Kazooie because I think it's much more fun in Kazooie than it is in Tooie. I just don't think the Hag 1 has the same fun factor for me. Both fights are a culmination of all of the abilities you've learned throughout the game. It's just I feel like it was implemented better in Kazooie. Alright, number 5, we have Onaga from Mortal Kombat Deception. Now, Onaga, when I was a kid, I thought was really difficult. That's because I didn't know that there's a very simple thing you can do. Destroy the Kamidogu. Destroy the Kamidogu and it makes him weak for a period of time and you pound on him. He can still be kind of hard and frustrating when you're playing it, but overall, if you do that, he's actually fairly easy. But he's a really cool boss, and throughout the story mode of Mortal Kombat Deception, he was deceiving you into thinking he was an elder god named Damashi, which itself is actually Japanese for deceiver. He's the Dragon King, and he's my favorite Mortal Kombat boss, and also from my favorite Mortal Kombat game, Deception. Very fun boss fight. A lot easier than I thought it was when I was a kid. Alright, at number 4, we have Gygus from Earthbound. Now, this is the only one on this list that I haven't actually fought, and that might seem kind of odd to you that I'd put it on it, but I just had to. I had to include Gygus. Gygus is such a cool boss. Like, he's a giant fetus monster that's like a wall of, like, flesh that attacks you. And his attacks are incomprehensible. They're like Lovecraftian. It literally says you cannot comprehend the scope of Gygus' attack. And everything leading up to the Gygus battle is fucking creepy and dark, whereas most of the game is bouncy, upbeat, and fun. Gygus is just fucking terrifying. Easily the best thing in Earthbound, and I think it's really cool. It was one of the first creepy video game things I became interested in, just because of how different it is from the rest of the game. But yeah, Gygus is really cool, so I had to put him in number 4. He's such a cool boss. Alright, number 3, Red from Pokemon Crystal. Why Pokemon Crystal? Because he's the only version I've fought. Red is widely considered to be the hardest trainer in Pokemon games. I think they say the Heart Gold Soul Silver version is harder, but again, I've only fought the Crystal version. I did get well prepared before I actually fought him. I fought him a total of 3 times. The first 2 times were just to kind of test it out and also to grind out some EXP. But once I was actually ready, I did beat him on my first real attempt. But again, I did a shitload of grinding. You have to do a lot of grinding for some of the Pokemon bosses. But I just think Red is so cool because it's the protagonist from the first game. You go up on the mountain, you find him, and without a word, you battle him. Once you defeat him, he just disappears, again, without a word. And you don't know why he was up there. When you talk to his family and stuff, all of them talk about how he's missing and they haven't seen him, which gives it kind of an air of creepiness about it too. But he's also just got a really overpowered and crazily strong team. So it's just such an interesting fight, and I think it's really cool that you face off the protagonist of a previous game against the protagonist of the current game. I thought that was a really cool idea. Alright, at number 2, we have Spectre from Ape Escape 3. Specifically Spectre Wars 1, but Spectre as a character in general as well. So, Spectre is the main villain from the Ape Escape series. He's an albino monkey who got the Peak Point helmet, made him super intelligent, and want to take over the world for monkeys. And you have to fight him at the end of each Ape Escape game. Ape Escape 3, you fight him in a giant mech gorilla named King Goriliac, and that's my favorite fight. That's the one we're talking about. And it has a really cool metal theme. That said, I do actually prefer Spectre's theme from the final battle, though the final battle is much more simplistic, so that's why I do prefer the Goriliac battle. Because the Goriliac battle starts out with you fighting the mech, having to shoot different key points on the giant mech, before finally going up and attacking Spectre himself after knocking the head off the mech. The second Spectre fight is literally just a repeat of the final phase of the Goriliac fight. You just fight Spectre in the little hover chair. So having the mech leading up to the hover chair I just think is that much cooler. I have a lot of fun with this fight, and I like to toy around using the different transformations to attack him, because you have all the transformations at this point in the game, with the exception of Super Monkey, but you will have Super Monkey when you do the final Spectre fight. But again, Super Monkey's not really a fighting one, so fair enough. But I've always just been a big fan of Ape Escape. It's super nostalgic for me. It was one of my favorite games growing up, specifically Ape Escape 3. And Spectre was a big part of that. I think he's such a cool villain. He's just got a lot of charisma, and he'll pop up and give you like a message on the screen while it plays his theme, and he's got a little hover chair and the little suit that he's got. I think he's cool. And again, he's got a big fucking mech, which was pretty cool too. Alright, before we get to number 1, we have a ton of honorable mentions, mostly excluded because of the no more than one franchise rule, but also some of them just barely missed being on the list, and I wanted to have a variety here. So the first honorable mention is one that will surprise you, because you probably thought this was going to be my number 1, but that is Undying the Undying. Undying the Undying was my number 1 for a very long time. However, something else has overtaken her, and you will see what it is once we finish these honorable mentions. But the reason she's on this list is because I couldn't have more than one character from the Undertale Deltarune franchise. But she's easily one of my favorite boss fights. Has a really cool intro where you try to kill Monster Kid, she steps in and sacrifices herself to save him, only to reawaken as Undying the Undying, one of the ultimate bosses in the game. It's just such a cool cutscene, her transformation, all the determination she has. It's such a cool fight, too. It's really difficult, and I enjoy it a lot. Like I said, it was my favorite fight for a while. Alright, next honorable mention we have is Spamton Neo, again from the Undertale Deltarune franchise. He's a really cool secret boss in Deltarune Chapter 2. I had a lot of fun fighting him. He's overall really cool. I like Spamton a lot as a character. I think he's pretty funny, too. Overall, really cool fight. I like it. It felt like a sort of what Mettaton Neo should have been. And so I like it because it kind of makes up for the fact that Mettaton Neo wasn't really a real fight. Next honorable mention we have is Jevil, the other secret boss from Deltarune. The one from Chapter 1. He's really fun too. Also really difficult. But still very enjoyable fight. Then of course we have Omega Flowey, who is the final boss of the neutral run in Undertale, and he's one of my favorite bosses in the game as well. It's more spectacle than anything, where they just throw a bunch of shit at you and you just have to make it through. But it's a really cool fight, and Flowey takes over your game, deletes your save file. It's really cool and meta, and it's very fun. Other than that, next up we have Bowser from Mario 64, but also just Bowser as a villain in general. The fight in Mario 64 is my favorite Bowser fight. It's fairly simplistic. You just pick him up and throw him at bombs. But still, it's one of my favorite fights of all time because it's iconic. Next up we have Monkey Yellow from Ape Escape 3. Again, also not on this list because of the one per franchise rule. But Monkey Yellow's a pretty cool fight. You fight him and he's like a ninja, or kind of a sumo ninja hybrid. And you have to use Miracle Ninja to defeat him, which is my favorite transformation in Ape Escape 3. He also has a really cool theme song. Another honorable mention from Ape Escape, we have Dr. Tomoki. Again, same reason he's not on this list, but it's also a mech battle where you use a mech and he uses a mech, so it's a pretty cool little fight. Next up, we have Tartarus from Halo 2. I think Tartarus was originally going to be on this list, but I kept tuning it over and over again. He's very close to being on this list. I really like Tartarus. Easily the best boss in the Halo series, I think, because he feels the most like a boss. Speaking of, the next honorable mention is 343 Guilty Spark, the boss in Halo 3. Much easier fight, but iconic, because Guilty Spark has been with you throughout all 3 games. He's iconic as well, one of the main characters of the series. You finally take him out, so that's a really cool fight. And then finally, the last honorable mention we have isn't necessarily an actual boss, but it's a section of a game, and that is the Pepsi Man factory level. Now again, I know it's not a boss, but the bosses in Pepsi Man are easy in comparison to the factory level itself. The factory level is ridiculously difficult and took me forever to beat it, but I had a lot of fun grinding to do it, so I felt it deserved a mention even though it's not technically a boss. Alright, now we're finally on to number 1, and you probably saw this coming with the fact that Undyne was a honorable mention, but we got Sans! Now, Sans is the most iconic boss in Undertale, Megalovania being the most iconic song from the game. It's easily supposed to be the hardest boss in the game, but I feel like once you actually learn it, it becomes easier. So that's part of why Sans has become my favorite boss, because I've fought him so many times. I've defeated him 3 times at the time of this recording. The first time took me 60 hours, the second time took me around 5 hours, and the third time only took me 2 attempts for maybe about 20 minutes. So that's why Sans made it to the top, because he's a boss that is very difficult, but also it's just memorization. Once you memorize his attacks, it's a lot easier, and it feels earned when you beat him. I also like that it's a battle of attrition, because he doesn't actually have a health bar, he just dodges until you can finally hit him, which I think is really cool too. You just keep swinging until you finally hit. I just spent so much time with this boss fight. I love the platforming, I love the music, I love the Gaster Blaster attacks, I love the blue heart that you use, I love everything about this fight, so I just had to make it number 1. I couldn't make it anywhere else. So yeah, as I said, you probably expected Sans to be number 1 at this point, because I fought him so much. I beat him, I fought him drunk. I'm still probably going to do that other Sans punishment stream, but I'm going to be honest, it'll probably be a lot easier just because I've gotten a lot better at the fight. Unless I wait a while and get rusty again, I don't fucking know. But it's a really cool fight that you don't actually, like, level up to get stronger. Instead, you just have to learn the attacks. And once you learn the attacks, you're actually a lot better at it because once you've memorized it, you can pull them off pretty consistently. I've no-hit Phase 1 plenty of times. I've never no-hit Phase 2, but maybe one day. Maybe one day I'll be able to no-hit the character. I don't know. We'll see. I also want to try and beat Sans without healing, which I've never done. And that spiral at the end is what killed me for a while on my first run, but in my last time defeating him, I took literally no damage on the spiral, so I think overall it's a fight that gets easier and easier the more you play it. But yeah, that's my top 10 video game bosses. I hope you guys enjoyed. This has been Fugitive Red Eye. Let me know in the comments what your favorite video game bosses are, if you agree, disagree, whatever. As always, have a good one. Toodles.